Welcome everyone, hope you're all having a good day. I just thought I'd jump on the group quite spontaneously to create a live to give some content about the new budget and what it means for you. And Mike has very kindly donated his time. We're going to speak on Rishi Sunak's impending budget changes which are going to apply in the new tax year, if I'm correct, Mike?
Most things, some things actually forward planned, but yeah, most.
Oh, there you go. I've learned something already. Mike is an absolute fountain of knowledge. He's on the group if anybody's interested. His name is Mike Bryan. He's always dishing out knowledge on tax and accountancy and things like that. It's super interesting. And I thought, who better to speak on the budget than Mike himself? So very privileged to have Mike here today. Hope you're good, Mike. And if you're happy, I'm just going to jump straight into some questions, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely, James.
Cool. So first of all, what I was interested, and I'm sure lots of other people will be in a similar boat to me, what I was interested to know, what is like a brief, concise summary of the most important changes? Because surely there's going to be a lot of information out there, and you'll know what's relevant better than any of us will. So I'm just curious to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I mean, our budget summary is 16 pages long. We've got maybe 10 or so minutes to cover this. So We're going to fly through some things. And this is just the summary. You can see what the detail.
Wow.
I've also condensed that down into a short A4 kind of size. So things that are relevant for dentists only. So let's crack straight on. We're going to start with sole traders. Okay, so not incorporated businesses. Well, individuals, let's call it actually. And the main change there is historically, government has increased tax bands at minimum with inflation, okay? Because as your income increases with inflation, you would expect tax bands to increase with inflation, because if they don't, your take home is going to go down, okay? You're going to have less cash because your taxes are artificially going up. So what's historically happened is the personal allowance has increased. It's increased quite significantly over the last 5 years. It's now at £12,500. So everyone can earn, not everyone, if you earn under £100,000, you can earn £12,500 tax free this tax year. That is going up. It's going up by 70 quid next tax year. Okay, so from 5th of April. But then it's going to be frozen for the next 5 tax years, I think, up to 2026. Okay,
Interesting.
Yeah. The effect is, assuming that the practice you work at has inflationary increases to their sales, which normally most practices would, or you have an inflationary increase to your associate contract, the effect will be that your take home will go down. Okay, the HMRC work that because there's no inflationary increase to those tax bands. Same thing applies to the higher rate of tax. Okay, £50,000 of earnings you could earn at the basic rate, assuming again you earn over 100k. That's going up to £50,270. So there's a small increase in the basic rate band of tax, but again that's then going to be frozen for the next 4 or 5 tax years.
What was that figure again? The basic rate's increasing to?
So the personal allowance is going to 12,570. Then the next £37,700 will be taxed at 20%. Okay, James. So what that means is you can earn £50,270 and not pay the higher rate band of tax.
Right, got you. Okay.
Now that changes, and this has been around for years. That changes if you earn over £100,000, and this is where tax gets excruciatingly painful for higher earners. When you earn over 100k, you start losing that personal allowance, that £12,500 of tax-free income. So actually, in that bracket, you pay 60% tax effective rate. Okay. Add on national insurance and student loan. If you've still got a student loan, actually you're paying away 71p to the pound. You're keeping 29p to the pound.
Wow. Yeah. And that can be a good idea to get into a SIP around about that territory for a lot of people.
Private pension contributions or limited companies. Yeah, absolutely. Two great plans there for mitigating that. So yeah, that's the main one for individuals. I think we'll just skip over into the next bit, which is your self-employment income support scheme. Okay, very, very useful for any individuals earning under £50,000. Now that takes the majority of full-time dentists out of the equation, but younger dentists, especially those that have just finished their FD year, may have actually crept into that bracket. Now the fourth and the fifth scheme have been announced. The main change is the first, second, and third were based on 18-19 tax returns. Okay, the fourth and the fifth are based on 19-20 tax returns. So any FDs any new associates that qualify, finish their FD year, and we get the year right in August 19, historically would not have got this grant. Now they may get this grant.
Oh, I see.
Okay, it's worth £7,500 for the fourth, and it's worth £7,500 for the fifth. So it's potentially worth £15,000 to the dentist. Worthwhile checking if you're eligible. If you are eligible because the numbers work, that's the first step. The second step is to think about whether coronavirus is still financially affecting you and whether you have reduced demand due to coronavirus. You look at fallow times for dentists, you look at the fact that an aging population probably aren't turning up to dental practices that often. You probably can tick those boxes, but you do need to think specifically to your personal circumstances. As with all of this, very, very important, specific to you. Don't rely on my information right now because I don't know the individual dentist's circumstances. Just quickly on the fifth grant, there is an income threshold. So they want you to declare that if your income has dropped by 30% or more, you will get the full grant. If it's dropped by 30% or less, you will only get 30% of that fifth grant. So it's caused a bit more confusion. There's a bit more calculations that need to go on. You need to ideally be speaking to your accountant, making sure they're your best friend at this moment in time to make sure they're checking whether you're allowed it and you can claim it. Super
interesting stuff. That's really cool. I didn't know half of that, and I'm sure that will be very relevant to a lot of people. And
can we
mention?
Go on, if you've got a question. I was just going to say there's still more that I want to cover on the overall update.
By all means, mate. Sorry, I thought you were finished. Yeah.
No. There's still a few more. Quickly for awesome. Employers, those practice owners and employ people, coronavirus job retention scheme has been extended to September. There's a lot of memes out there that say, well, the country goes back to normal in June. The support schemes extended to September. What's going on here? It doesn't quite add up. Who knows? There's apprentice schemes and traineeship schemes available, so you can get grants if you've got nurses perhaps going through training programs. There's maybe £1 to £3,000 that you can claim there, and there's also worthwhile looking into. A lot of dental practices ignore that, so definitely worthwhile see if you can get your hands on that. And there is another loan scheme. So anyone that needs a cash injection from the bank, they should be able to get their hands on a bit more cash from the bank. Yes, via a loan, so it is repayable, but it is backed by the government up to 80% of that loan, which will just allow the banks to hopefully quickly lend rather than going through stringent credit checks. Then we jump into corporation tax. Okay, those trading as limited companies. This is massive. This is probably the biggest change of the budget. There's two things that I really want to cover, and then a throwaway comment at the end. Corporation tax rates going from 19% to 25%. Okay, it's not coming in until 23-24, so you don't need to worry about it until April 23. But it's a massive jump from 19 to 25%. Okay, again, things are a bit more confusing. Historically, 19% doesn't matter if a company earns £1 or £5 million. It's 19%. With the CT rate now, there's a small profits exemption. So if your profits are under £50,000, you pay 19%. If your profits are over £250,000, you pay 25%. If your profits are between the two, you pay somewhere between the two. The devil's in the detail. They haven't announced exactly how it works yet, so we're still not sure. But I imagine it will, well, it definitely will be somewhere between the two. They'll probably push it towards the higher end if they can. One step further with that, if you have associated companies, say you're an associate trading as a limited company and you have a property company for your property portfolio, they will look at one, they will count those as two connected companies, and therefore they will divide the £250,000 limit by 2. So you're going to pay more tax in that example, 125 grand in each. It's getting very confusing. You need to take advice if that's in your that's your circumstances. Good news on the other side of it.
Yes, please. Let's hear some good news. Let's hear some good news.
This super deduction. Okay, I've called it a super deduction. It's from April this year to March 2023. So it coincides with the increase of taxes we just talked about. It finishes when the increase of taxes come in. It means anyone that's investing in equipment, in refurbishment of practices, in any capital allowances, we believe, still the eye in the detail, still to be unveiled, but you will be able to deduct 130% of the cost of that equipment. Put that into layman's terms, you spend 50 grand on doing up a practice, a surgery, you actually deduct £65,000 from your taxes, okay, 130%.
Wow.
And therefore you pay less tax in the next 2 years. The theory is quite simple. The theory is let's try and get companies to invest now, to make businesses better now, and then let's tax them higher in 2 years' time. Tax relief now, higher taxes 2 year time. Okay, it costs the government now, but then we get more taxes in, obviously the government gets more taxes from 23, 24.
Wow, I don't remember there ever being so many wholesale changes in a budget, but I guess it's unprecedented times. Or is this common in your experience?
No, I mean, I'd say this one's because of the coronavirus pandemic. I think there's a lot more going on now than what there was in historic.
Definitely. When we talked, was there more you wanted to add to that? Then?
Well, I was just going to say,
it's super interesting.
I don't think we're there yet. I think next year there'll be more probably negative impacts on taxes. The Tories announced a few years ago they wouldn't increase income tax for individuals. They haven't. They wouldn't increase VAT. They haven't. They wouldn't increase. I don't know if they said CGT. Anyway, they haven't. They had stuck to their manifesto of a few years ago. That ends soon, so it may well be that they look at maybe some increases next year.
Yeah.
There's stamp duty exemption still going on. There's a new mortgage scheme for 5% 5% deposit holders. CGT, James, your viewers will be pleased to hear, hasn't changed. That £12,300 exemption remains and will remain.
Days.
Yeah. So those with crypto and investments outside ISAs, you can still play the game to make sure you're not paying CGT on any gains that you make. There's loads more, but I think we've covered the main ones.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That was a great summary. I have another question here. It was on start dates, but we kind of just answered that somewhat, I suppose. So the official start date of the new budget is, of course, early April. So that would be the new tax year, rather, is early April. Is it April the 6th, Mike?
The 6th of April is the day the new tax year begins, yeah.
Yes, correct. And then, but I believe a lot of those changes that you spoke about, there's about 10 different changes and they've got about 20 different start dates there, but you summarized them very nicely. You summarized it very nicely. There's a lot of them, and it sounds like they aren't even set in stone, really, a lot of them at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the corporation taxes will happen, but the eye in the detail of the marginal relief isn't announced yet. The personal allowance freezes are frozen and they are guaranteed to stay the same until, I think, 25, 26. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I've got it all written down here somewhere.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, 25, 26, the personal tax bans will be frozen too. So, yeah, it's not simple. As I mentioned, there's a 16-page document here of our budget summary. We can't condense it into 10, 20 minutes, but we've hit the main one for dentists, that's for sure. If anyone wants a copy, feel free to ask me. I'll ping it over to them.
Cool. Is the worst yet to come then in terms of taxation increases? Do you see this as the tip of the iceberg and the government are going to come with their hand out even further down the line?
I would expect so. I would imagine that, yes, there's more to come. The increase in corporation tax is quite large. Okay, we'll still be one of the lowest corporation tax rates in the big G7 countries. Why it was quite surprising is because corporation tax inspires large employers, okay, and therefore you don't want to annoy them because we don't want unemployment. But us being still one of the lowest in G7 is still reason for them to remain and invest in our country. But yeah, no increases in personal tax rates probably could be looked at some point next year, the next budget perhaps, but we don't know until we get there.
Cool, fair enough. And I know that you've done a really good job of summarizing the general changes. If you were to pick out some of the most relevant ones to dentists, what would those be? What were those ones that would directly affect us the most?
Definitely the ones we've talked about. So yeah, in that summary, I really did focus on dentists anyway, and removed a lot of the stuff that doesn't matter. There's VAT exemptions for hospitality. We haven't looked at that. There's a lot going on. It is the personal allowance freeze. It's the corporation tax and the super deduction, and yeah, the employment, the self-employment government support scheme.
Cool. Mike is way ahead of me on that one. Awesome, Mike. Thank you so much. And
no worries.
How can we, this is the best bit, this is the kicker, okay? We've got all these changes. Yeah. Apart from I know that you mentioned grants and things like that. Any other ways that we can take advantage of them that are unique to dentists?
Well, there's an interesting question that was poised on the group yesterday or the day before that seemed to get quite a lot of responses. So if we look at an associate dentist or a principal, okay, you have the right on how you structure your business. There's an issue with NHS pensions and limited companies, and that's why a lot of dentists will remain sole traders. Okay, that the ability to split your business into an NHS sole trader and a limited company for your private. And I want to really reiterate, anyone that's read that thread, you need to take advice specific to your circumstances. But there is the ability to save a significant amount of tax by looking at something like that, okay? Okay, it's more complex. You have two businesses. You need to jump through some hoops to set it up correctly. Don't bodge it. I've seen it firsthand where dentists have come to me and they've said, oh, I've been doing this for years, but actually they haven't. They've been, really not doing it correctly. If you've got a lower earning spouse, if you've got plans to invest in dental practices, grow other businesses, and really are quite motivated and ambitious that way, then potentially looking at that will save you a significant amount of tax.
Cool. So yeah, devil's in the detail, I think, really, as you say, and maybe worth just getting your accountant involved past a certain point. Okay, Mike, is there anything else you'd like to say just to wrap up and conclude? I thought that was wonderful, really helpful today.
No, I mean, maybe to just conclude, IR35 for dentists, it's a big topic. I would be really interested to hear from any of your members if any of the corporates are suggesting they can no longer trade as a limited company. It looks at employment status of a dentist. Okay, is a dental associate employed or self-employed? And it's really going to probably come into fruition in the next few months as to drilling down to make sure that associate remains self-employed. In my opinion, that's the best answer for all of you, because taxes are better and your autonomy whilst you're working is better. So that's probably a final point just to leave with your members. And if anyone has any further questions on that, come back to me.
Cool, no problem. Actually, Mike, we've got some questions here, some that people have just typed in the chat box. So if you have a few moments, we could even answer some of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super quick. There's only 2 or 3 here. Suleiman Saka says, good morning, James and Mike. Good morning, Suleiman. Hope you're well. Thanks for joining us. Vivek has said, is this for self-employed or limited companies? It's hard to know. The trouble is, Vivek, there's a bit of a lag between us talking and the questions. So it's hard to know exactly what you're referring to there because of the time lag, Vivek. If you're happy to make that more clear in the questions box, we'll be happy to answer that. Sherry has said, again, another one that's kind of referring to something we were talking about. Good news for solo traders or limited companies or both. Hard to know exactly what you're referring to, Sherry, but I think overall, well, there's some caveats, really. I don't know if it's necessarily good news for either, really, this budget. Is it, Mike? No.
Not really. The freeze in personal taxes it's not negative, really. It is negative. It's not a huge negative. Okay, they could have increased 20% up, 40% up. They haven't. So I'd say that's probably a lower negative, a better negative than corporation tax, where corporation tax was pretty negative for those trading as limited companies, unless they're lower earners.
Cool, no problem. Vivek has typed another question. Oh, it's really just kind of added something to the conversation. You can apply for bounce back loans if you have a business account, including those who have a current account and trading as a sole trader through that current account. Does that make sense, Mike? And is that something that you've heard of?
Yeah, so any businesses can apply for bounce back loans. A lot of the banks were defining businesses as having a business bank account. Okay, that's not a true definition of being a business, but that's what the banks use, and that's their choice. And so if you're a sole trade dentist, a dentist trading as a limited company, you could potentially get a bounce back loan from your bank. It's 0% interest for 12 months, then it's 2.5% interest thereafter. So yeah, potential to get cash injection there.
Cool. Fair enough. Peter has asked, will this be available afterwards on the group? Yes, Peter, as soon as I stop this live, Facebook processes it for about 30 minutes and then it's live. Sherry has said, hang on, Vivek has said, I've forgotten what I wanted to ask. No worries, Vivek. Hopefully we've given you enough information in that live to make it worth your while. Sherry has said, the good news was about buying equipment. Yes, that is true. That is true. There is some good news, I suppose, Sherry. You're quite right. And the 130% claiming back is also quite good. And Vivek has just snuck one question in there just before the final whistle. Can hygienists be classed as self-employed? Good question. I don't know. Can they?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the majority of hygienists are self-employed. Again, it looks at the legal contract or the working arrangements between the hygienist and the practice. It all goes down to who controls the hygienist, who tells them when to work, are they working using their own equipment or not, can they work at other practices? So there's a lot of considerations into it. I would argue from both the, maybe not from the hygienist side, but from the practice side, they want hygienists to be self-employed because it's cheaper from taxes. From the hygienist side, it's bit to and fro. So the hygienist may want self-employment because they have ability to work at other practices. They have a bit more freedom. They have a bit more clever tax expenses they can claim to reduce their taxes. On the other side, the hygienist may want to be employed because they get holiday pay, sick pay, protection against redundancy, and it's a guaranteed income every single month. So pros and cons of both.
Cool, fair enough. There's some other questions sneaking in here. I wanted to keep this live really bite-sized, guys. So if you want to ask Mike any questions, he is available on the group. Yeah. His name is Mike Bryan. We're going to wrap up now. Mike, thank you so much for giving up your Saturday morning to come and talk to us. And I think there was a lot of really valuable information in there for dentists.
Just one throwaway comment, James. Sorry.
Totally. Yeah, let's hear it.
Anyone thinking with a limited company, thinking of investing in a hybrid car, should do it before the end of the month, because the rules change and it will be electric only after the end of the month. Okay, so there's quite a big change in tax allowances for hybrid cars. I forgot to mention that it's quite cliff edge. It's quite time important, but a bit niche, I suppose.
Great stuff. Okay, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great Saturday.